Hello, this is Adam with DreamMade Productions. This video is made possible by the very kind donations of viewers like you. Thank you. If you are in a position to help this channel improve quality and grow, please visit my Patreon page at www.patreon.com/DreamMadeProductions, linked below. For some reason, Dark Souls and its related games have been on my mind recently. I guess since I missed out on the Elden Ring DLC. For now, anyway. And some stress going on behind the scenes. I've been wanting to sit down with a good Souls-like game and lose myself for a long while. This got me thinking about my relationship with hard video games throughout my video game life, career, whatever. Ever since I was old enough to understand difficulty. In a way, my life has followed the development of video games. Not perfectly, mind you. But as far as at-home consumer video game systems, I've been around for quite a while. I was born in 1981 and first played a video game at my cousin's house when I was very little. The fact that I could press a button and something would happen on the screen was new to me. Well, in reality, back then everything was new to me. Getting an NES in the 80s was the start of my video game experiences. However, since systems that predated me were still floating around, I knew friends and family who still had Ataris, Colecos, and Intellivisions. Back then, as a kid under 10, I suppose every video game was, in a way, hard to me. I can't say the hardest NES game I ever beat. I remember spending hours playing Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2, the arcade game, trying to beat it. I got to the point that I could reliably get to Shredder, but never managed to actually beat him. The brick wall trap in Double Dragon Hallway stopped me from reaching the game's final boss. Such roadblocks stopped me in my tracks. I did not have some of the legendarily hard games for NES. Castlevania, Mega Man, Ghosts and Goblins. I would not play these games until I was a teenager. I can tell you the hardest game I ever did beat as a kid. Super Ghouls and Ghosts for the SNES. I remember playing that game for hours, days, over and over, just trying to win, getting to the so-called last boss, and then, of course, having to play through the whole game again, this time requiring the bracelet weapon to advance to the true final boss. Side note, the magical bracelet sucks. That is all. Finally winning at Super Ghouls and Ghosts that one time, perhaps, was my highest point as a gamer. My time with hard games would pause with the maturity to enjoy RPGs. Final Fantasy III or 6 or whatever for the SNES grabbed me in ways I was just too young at the time for the earlier RPGs too. Shooters like GoldenEye and the wealth of RPGs on PlayStation 1 pulled me away from anything really difficult. But the true Dark Souls story actually begins in earnest with Ninja Gaiden for Xbox and Devil May Cry 3 for PS2. I would go to my buddies' parties and they had the reboot of Ninja Gaiden. The drunk 20-somethings would pass around the controller, ragging on each other trying to get out of the first room. I, being the mostly non-drinker I am, became popular for a while because I could actually play the game some. Not having an Xbox and still deep into my RPGs, I was by no means good at the game, just good enough to impress the drunkards. At least until a friend of mine who was actually good at the game showed up. But that memory would plant a seed. Devil May Cry 1 and 3 were a lot of fun, and I found I enjoyed them even more on the harder settings. A friend of mine remembered me playing on harder modes of Devil May Cry 3 and suggested a game I had never heard of, Dark Souls 2. That's right, I won't claim I was there from the beginning. I wasn't a grizzled veteran of Demon Souls. I was not an edgy fan of From Software before From Software became cool to be a fan of. My buddy came over and through, let's call it means less than legal, gifted me a copy of vanilla Dark Souls 2 for PC. Having come off my attempt to beat DMC3 on its hardest settings, I would start up Dark Souls 2 and get my first taste of what was to come.
Perhaps you've seen it, maybe in a dream, a murky, forgotten land. A place where souls may mend your ailing mind. You will lose everything once branded, the symbol of the curse, an augur of darkness. Your past, your future, your very light. None will have meaning, and you won't even care. By then, you'll be something other than human. A thing that feeds on souls, a hollow. Long ago, in a walled-off land far to the north, a great king built a great kingdom. I believe they called it Drang Lake. Perhaps you're familiar. No, how could you be? But one day, you will stand before its decrepit gate without really knowing why. Like a moth drawn to a flame, your wings will burn in anguish. is your fate. The fate of the cursed.
I will give a hot take here. That intro is still my favorite from all the Souls-like games I've played. Without the context of Dark Souls 1, this is all the information I had as I began my adventure. Now, I was familiar with starting a game nearly helpless, as Dark Souls 2 starts you. A basic tutorial level which I took to. Met the Firekeepers, chose my class, and began to play the game as I would any other action game. That would go about as well as you would expect for a Dark Souls game. It took me quite a while to hear the Majula theme and open up to the larger world. Dark Souls 2 gets a lot of hate, some of which I can understand, some of which I think is unfair, and some of which I agree with. I will say that my experiences with Dark Souls 2 has been largely positive. I struggled with the game both to become accustomed to the ways of FromSoft games and another issue. You see, months later my buddy would be surprised that I was struggling so much with the game. On a visit to my house, he discovered I was playing a Dark Souls game on an even harder setting. My PC was just under the minimum requirements, leading to drop frames, short draw distances, and some input lag. My buddy, after playing on my PC for a short while and experiencing a Dark Souls game at sub 10 frames per second at times, became impressed I could play the game at all, let alone nearly beat the game. Upgrading to the PS3 version required a restart, but also gave me the Dark Souls experience, including seeing the world of Dran Lake in its, for the time, beauty. It would be some time before I could play through the full Dark Souls 2 Complete Edition. Some people love the changes and added content. Others claim they made a bad game even worse. I see the complete version of the game almost as its own experience. My advice, if you are going to play only one version of the game, start with the vanilla version. It has a feel closer to Dark Souls 1, and that is a good feeling. Adding and changing content was a great addition to have me come back, but the changes turned some people off. And turn some people off even more. If you enjoy the vanilla version, quickly upgrade to the complete version for added challenge and lore. Either way, don't let the hate stop you. Dark Souls 2 is more than worth playing. Having completed the vanilla game, it took me no time at all to hunt down Dark Souls 1. Having beaten Dark Souls 2 before Dark Souls 1, going back was shocking. Pretty much every Dark Souls fan I've ever talked with lists the original Dark Souls as the best of the lot. I more or less agree with this take. One never forgets their first Dark Souls experience. The dark themes, the environmental storytelling, the bosses, the difficulty, the heart-crushing feeling of dying just before you can touch your bloodstain and regain all those souls that are now lost forever. For many, this was Dark Souls 1. While the structure of Dark Souls 1 and 2 are very similar, a central hub with paths leading off to explore, Dark Souls 1 world makes much more logical sense. Dark Souls 2 have spokes, more or less self-contained paths branching off from Majula. Dark Souls 1, on the other hand, is closer to a web. Several clear paths to follow, but seemingly endless loopbacks and shortcuts that make the world feel connected and much less like video game levels. Both games feature a what I call "what the hell happened here" theme, where Dark Souls 2, lighter on the lore, did use its actual environment to let me come up with theories on what happened. Clearly some kind of cataclysm. I built theories to be confirmed or changed as the game progressed. The lore of Dark Souls 1 is deeper and much more meaningful, especially compared with the other games in the series. The difference seen in its opening. Dark Souls 1 intro serves as an introduction to the world and provides context for the upcoming adventure. While I agree the Dark Souls 1 intro is far more important to the story of Dark Souls, the Dark Souls 2 opening is much more personal, much more raw, and pulls at my emotions much, much more than learning about Gwyn and his fellow gods.
In the age of ancients, the world was unformed, shrouded by fog. A land of grey crags, arch trees, and everlasting dragons. But then there was fire, and with fire came disparity. Heat and cold, life and death, and of course, light and dark. Then from the dark they came and found the souls of lords within the flame. Nito, the first of the dead. The Witch of Izalith and her daughters of Chaos. Gwyn, the Lord of Sunlight, and his faithful knights. And the furtive pygmy, so easily forgotten. With the strength of lords, they challenged the dragons. Gwyn's mighty bolts peeled apart their stone skills. The witches weaved great firestorms. Nito unleashed a miasma of death and disease. And Seath the Scaleless betrayed his own, and the dragons were no more. Thus began the Age of Fire. But soon the flames will fade, and only dark will remain. Even now, there are only embers. And man sees not light, but only endless nights. And amongst the living are seen carriers of the accursed dark side.
Combined, Dark Souls 1 and 2 are games that I had the most fun with. Sort of. More on that later. As much as Dark Souls 2 is disliked by some, a few even calling it to be expunged from the Dark Souls trilogy, I disagree. For me, the definitive, purely Dark Souls experience are those two games. The story, the world of Dark Souls 1, and the discovery of Dark Souls 2. The slow, methodical risk management of those first two games appeal most to my gaming sensibilities. Playing it safe, drawing off enemies, careful planning, slow exploration, careful planning. Learning to play these games in my own way would be rewarded in the first two games. These fraternal twins, while far from identical, share enough DNA to be what I think of when someone says Souls-like. Here is where you would expect me to start talking about Bloodborne, and I will, but to a much more limited degree. After having Dark Souls 1 and 2 train me to be slow, careful, making the most of my shield and armor, Bloodborne was a kick to the nuts. Bloodborne plays hard on aggression, risk, and pinpoint timing, none of which is my playstyle. The game is beautiful and lore-packed as to be expected from Software. Its Victorian Gothic horror, an appealing change from the fantasy medieval of Dark Souls. I played the game for a while, but eventually dropped it. I could not master the parry mechanic in Dark Souls 1 or 2. I made it through without it. In Bloodborne, perfect dodging and especially parrying became the game's bread and butter. I simply failed to adapt and sadly, hence, missed out on a game I doubt I will ever get the full experience of. When Dark Souls 3 exploded onto the scene, to say I was excited would be an understatement. Having missed out on Bloodborne, I was ready for a new adventure, not linked to my ability to parry or dodge roll perfectly. Having the context of Dark Souls 1 and 2 with the return to the story proper, I thought Dark Souls 3 would easily be my favorite. Dark Souls 3, while a masterpiece for many, spelled what I thought was the end of my From Software Souls-like experience. Dark Souls 3 leans very heavily into Dark Souls 1, with some calling it the true sequel, completely discounting Dark Souls 2. As much as some people want that to be the case, there are nods to Dark Souls 2 here and there in the game. But clearly, the focus is the ending to the basic story set up in Dark Souls 1.
Yes, indeed. It is called Lothric, where the transitory lands of the Lords of Cinder converge. In venturing north, the pilgrims discover the truth of the old words. The fire fades, and the lords go without thrones. When the link of fire is threatened, the bell tolls, unearthing the old lords of Cinder from their graves. Aldrich, Saint of the Deep, Satan's undead legion, the Abyss Watchers. And the reclusive lord of the profaned capital. Yon the Giant. Only in truth, the lords will abandon their thrones. And the unkindled will rise. Nameless, accursed undead, unfit even to be cinder. And so it is that ash seeketh embers.
After watching that opening, I moved to create the new version of the character who had seen me through Dark Souls 1 and 2, the magic-wielding Juggernaut. Enough magic to cast a few soul arrows, the rest into armor, carrying capacity, and hit points. Magic shots to draw out foes, one or two at a time, enough armor and hit points to survive mistakes as I learn patterns, hide behind the shield and armor, and wait for my chance to counterattack. A simple formula, and one that nearly failed me in Dark Souls 3. Having incorporated the more aggressive and faster-paced combat, Bloodborne, Dark Souls 3 was my limit in keeping up with the action. Growing older, my reaction time has already begun to diminish. Long gone was the kid who could dodge his way into beating super ghouls and ghosts. The earlier Dark Souls games had rewarded the slow, methodical tactician that had grown from the loss of reflexes. Dark Souls 3, while still playable this way, I watched as my girlfriend enjoyed much more success with a simple knight build. Side tangent time. As much as I loved her, she simply could not handle losing well. Even simple games, she would get very frustrated after just a few deaths. While watching me play some Dark Souls 1 in preparation for the upcoming Dark Souls 3, she announced her desire to try her own character. I was outwardly supportive. Inwardly, I cringed. While I am always excited when a pretty girl expresses an interest in my very nerdy hobbies, I was worried about how she would react and how much it would cost. One PS3 controller had already fell victim to her losing her temper and slamming it into the floor. Her frustration with an Uncharted game, not exactly known for their difficulty, had already claimed the soul of a controller. What would happen when she played Dark Souls? I think it says a lot that she never raged at Dark Souls. Well, not really. She would get upset and storm off. But she came back. And questioned about why she reacted so differently, she said that Dark Souls always felt fair. When she died, she felt she died not out of some wall set up to drain her resources or sudden spike in difficulty. With some time and no broken gaming accessories, she managed to beat all 3 Dark Souls games. Get a bit further than I did in Bloodborne, as well as another game. A testament to From Software's skill in crafting a challenging game. Hard as balls, but never unfair. Except as a bit of grim levity at your expense. Getting back to Dark Souls 3, I managed to fight my way through the game, but suffered from using obsolete tactics. Dark Souls 3 also had less of my what the hell happened here theory crafting I enjoyed so much in my Dark Souls 2 and to a lesser but still effective degree in Dark Souls 1. Dark Souls 3 so much is a reflection of the first game. While there is plenty to discover and new challenges, I felt like a detective very few times. As I closed the game down for the last time, I thought From Software had made their choice. My playstyle had been replaced by the faster-paced, more aggressive Bloodborne influence. Sekiro Shadows Die Twice only further convinced me of the loss. I sadly skipped that game completely. I had plans to go back and get Demon Souls since I gave up on Bloodborne. I actually bought the PS3 original and had it on my shelf waiting for time to really enjoy it. Then I learned that a Demon Souls remake would be a launch title for the PS5. At first I was worried. A remake could be awesome, or it could completely change the game to the faster-paced Bloodborne style. I was overjoyed when I learned that no, the remake would be more or less just remaking the game with better graphics. This led me to put off playing Demon Souls. Almost as soon as the game hit the shelves, I picked up Demon Souls. You know, let the initial PS5 craziness die down, then buy one a few months in. Oh, who could have guessed that for years, Demon Souls for PS5 would sit on my shelf unopened, as getting the system would prove difficult. Eventually, I managed to get a PS5 and enjoy the game that started it all. My magic-wielding juggernaut would return and easily for a Souls-like, carry me through the mists. I am unsure if Demon Souls started development for the PS3 or was once designed or conceived for the PS2. Regardless, Demon Souls reminds me much more of Dark Souls 2, a central hub, in this case the Nexus, connecting you to spokes on a rimless wheel, rather than an interconnected world to explore. The world's feeling very much like video game levels. It's kind of why I suspect Demon Souls may have begun the concept phase with the PS2 in mind. Then again, Metal Gear Solid 3 let you openly travel a lot of that world, so who knows? It's just conjecture on my part. The story is simpler and much more laid out in Demon Souls. In short, humanity done fucked up. God-like super demon appears and sends out waves of demons to eat humans and generally cause chaos. You show up, get smacked down, and off to the races. While with all the From Software Souls games, there is plenty left for theories and interpretation. Demon Souls was a simpler game, and a herald of things to come. I wouldn't normally mention the vast wealth of third-party Souls-like games out there. I played several to varying degrees. I thought I would briefly mention two games. First, Remnant from the Ashes. The first Remnant game was my first non-From Software Souls-like. Mixing Dark Souls with shooter gunplay sounds like a disaster waiting to happen. To the contrary, it worked out remarkably well. However, what truly drew me in was the mystery and exploration. Remnant made me feel that what the hell happened here more than any game since my initial playing of Dark Souls 2. It had me crafting theories until the next piece of lore was confirmed. Sadly, I never finished the game. I was playing online with some friends, and we just couldn't get our schedules to match up. What time we did spend in the game past the initial discovery phase, we had different agendas. I wanted to explore the lore, environmental storytelling, and theory craft. They were much more interested in playing through the game. One of these days I need to restart the game and either play solo or find a group that doesn't mind me reading all the lore bits as I find them. The next game I will mention is Code Vein. As an anime fan, mixing anime characters into a Souls-like game was a lot of fun. Nothing in the game excelled in my opinion. The game did what it was supposed to do. Give you a Souls-like adventure with, at least in my playthrough, a harem of sexy anime waifus to keep you company. A fun game. A pretty game. A game worth playing even if it did not wow me. Finally, we can talk about From Software's near masterpiece, Elden Ring. When Elden Ring was announced, I was a bit crestfallen. The game looked great, but I had some very nagging concerns that I could not let go of. First was George R.R. Martin's involvement. Not him personally. As much controversy as he has around him at times, that was not my concern. No. My concern about his attachment to the project was if From Software had blown a large part of their budget for his involvement rather than relying on their own internal writing team, which had already proven themselves time and time again. My other concern was, of course, how fast the game would be. Would it be another Bloodborne, Sekiro, fast-paced, aggression-based game? That was my fear. I began to get excited, but tried to temper myself. Once the game came out, well, what can I say? It grabbed me in ways no game had since the initial Dark Souls 2 and 1 days. The combat, the story, the environment, the art, the music, all was amazing. However, what truly struck me was the world, both the game world and the real world. Back in the day before internet walkthroughs, kids on the playground would talk about things they found in video games. The Zelda games I remember the most clear chatter about. Listening to some kid, you may find a secret that eluded you. Or you may spend hours and hours looking for something the kid made up. Elden Ring brought people together. Adults, mind you, back to those playground days. People at work were talking about it, not just gamers. It seemed non-gamers had picked up a controller to explore the lands between as well. My girlfriend and I would spend hours talking about what we had found on our journeys, the differences in playstyle, and how all builds seemed serviceable. She took over my magic-wielding juggernaut, while I, on the other hand, started off the wretch, using only what I could find and making a counterattack machine. It was amazing to hear normal people stand around talking about what they found in Elden Ring. It supplanted sports ball. Well, for a time, anyway. The story deep as one would expect by now from Software and told in pieces. For a good chunk of the game, my what the hell happened here got my mind racing. Theories abounded. It was a glorious return. With the Elden Ring DLC aging and me still having not played it, I do look forward to the time I can sit down and enjoy it. I hope beyond hope that From Software will announce an Elden Ring 2 or Dark Souls 4. With E3 long gone, the Game Awards have become my night of nights to hope. Well, story time over, folks. Back to trying and failing to get the next battle report out on my time schedule. Who am I kidding? All my careful scheduling has long since gone out the window. Things happen as they happen until I am secure enough to leave one of my jobs and build this channel proper. I have a saying: I like my life easy and my video games hard. Life, well, life has other ideas. At any rate, what Dark Souls stories do you have? What about Elden Ring? Were you taken back to the playground game talk? Or maybe you were young enough to be swept up in that feeling for the first time ever? Let me know below. Also, let me know if you want to hear me ramble on about video games, systems, or other nonsense. I'm full of nonsense after all. Whatever. As always, I hope you enjoy the battle reps that are to come. Hello, this is Adam with Dream Made Productions. Thank you for watching my content. It really means a lot that you have given me the chance to entertain you. If you would like to support the channel, please visit my Patreon at patreon.com/DreamMadeProductions, linked below. Also below is a link for PayPal, or links if you would like to send crypto, if that's more your thing. Please know any amount that you give will be cherished and used to upgrade equipment and improve the channel. You can also help the channel by subscribing, turning on notifications, liking, commenting, and sharing my channel with anyone you think might be interested. Thank you again for watching, and I hope you enjoy the battle reps that are to come.